Questions?
Yeah, so I think this week I feel like I kind of figured out the difference between like kind of feeling the awareness versus feeling like the sensation and stuff. Uh, I think what I was doing kind of in like wrong before is when I was feeling the when I was doing the turning the light around, or when I was kind of just like kind of stepping back and feeling uh, feeling the awareness. If I think what I was doing, I was kind of somehow creating like the feeling around this area dense, and that was
Which
feeling like
area?
okay.
Show me again which area.
So the area basically around the head up till like the chest, like this area,
Okay,
dense.
like
And
this, you're
I
saying.
was,
Okay, go
yeah,
ahead.
and I was thinking that that is like awareness. Like for example, when I'll say this is me, or like I want to do this, so this I feeling,
Mm-hmm.
I think I was calling that as awareness. But then last week suddenly I realized that awareness should not be this thing that I kind of forced to feel when I say I or these kind of things. So then I went back to how I feel normally, when like the feeling that how I was as a child and how I feel now, that feeling. And that is very subtle. And that feeling is not tied to a space, it's not localized. It's kind of, yeah, it's not localized. I can't say it's between from my head to chest, it's kind of spread out.
So for your head
It's
to
more,
the chest is sensation, you say.
yeah, yeah, it feels like more like sensation.
Okay, so
And
tell,
then
tell, tell me how you felt as a child.
so like always growing up, I felt, so when I will say that this is me, or this is my body, or this is me in the world, it always felt like kind of, it's kind of this feeling that I exist, and this I is like a way, or like a feeling or something. I don't know how to describe, but it's like this thing that I can recognize or I can feel, and I used to call that, and I call that as I. This is me.
Can you give a an example with what you were doing as a child when you had that let's call it experience? I mean, is there a specific time in your life that you recall this?
It's basically I used to ponder on the question, uh, like, uh, like, uh, like, 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 who am I? So basically, I will notice that I'm getting older with time, but I also notice that the way I feel about myself is the same, whether I
That's
was
true.
4 years
Good.
old, 4 years old, or whether I'm like in my 20s or 30s.
Four
The
years
feeling
old
is
or
the
in your 20s, right?
yeah. So its
Okay.
feeling is exactly the same
Okay, that's when you were when.
as like maybe even like yesterday, or maybe even like an year before.
Okay. All right.
It,
So
it
now,
always
so
feels,
now describe. You said 4 years old.
yeah, like 4 or 5, yeah.
Okay, so describe an instance if you
An
can.
instant, yeah. So like for example, I will be going to school like with my backpack on, and I'm like going to school, and then I will think uh, that I'll feel like, oh, where am I? Kind of this question, like where am I on the street, or how do I know that, or the question like, am I changing? Am I becoming more mature with time? And then I will ponder that nothing is changing in me. I still feel the same. So am I kind
So
of
this
like
is when you were
behind?
5. When you're 5.
This was, I think the first time I remember asking this was when I was like maybe 8 or 9, like when I was like very early in the school. and I feel like, and I will feel that, I think it will happen when I'm about to like graduate from one class to the next class,
Okay.
and at that time I will think that I am now passing the exam, I'm going to the next class, but feeling wise it feels the same, nothing has changed. So what
Okay.
is
Well, that's very true. I mean, you. I mean, and that's something that everyone should observe. That their consciousness, regardless of the objects of that consciousness, is the same whether you're 4 or 40 or 80. The consciousness is something that does not change. It's called the unchanging or the constant for that reason. I mean, that's one of the names of it. All right.
Mhm, mhm.
But okay, so now, what are you saying? Let's go back to the what are you saying exactly now here today?
Yeah, so now when I so then when I so last week when I was going back to that memory of how I was feeling as a child, how I was feeling, I usually feel when I think about it, and then I realized, so that feeling is not dense, it's not localized, and I don't have to struggle to locate where am I in the space. It's just natural. So maybe that is what is that is how awareness feels like, or how it is.
It's certainly closer. It's certainly closer. But by 8 or 9, of course, you already have a fully developed ego,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that you're recollecting your thinking at the time
Mm-hmm.
shows that the object of that thinking is thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're certainly headed in the right direction. So are you localized now?
So when I'm not thinking, when I go back to uh, just so like when I go back to that turning the light around thing, just like dropping, then I'm not localized.
When you're not thinking, you're not localized.
Like it's like switching. So when I drop the kind of when I kind of drop the sensations, and I just
What do you mean
I
drop the
don't
sensations?
so like when I am concentrating, when I am doing certain activity,
Mm-hmm.
then I feel like I am localized. When I am not concentrating, when there's nothing to do, uh, then I quickly go into that turning the light around kind of feeling,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm localized.
So are you localized now?
And no, but when I go back to talking, or like asking or question, then I localize again.
Well, that's certainly in the right direction. So just stay in that state throughout your day. Turn the
Hmm.
light around and
Yes.
stay in that undifferentiated awareness. What's the problem?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't think there's a problem. It's just that I I learned. I think I learned this just last week, and I still kind of question myself that I
What do
need
you question
that.
yourself? What do you say to yourself?
Yeah, so I still question: is it the feeling of awareness I should get when I'm turning the light around, or am I still missing something?
Well, it's not a feeling and it's not a sensation. I suppose, but language is limited, right? So what are you going to say? But so, what's the question again?
I don't think there was a question. I just wanted to just like mention that I was mistaken so far of thinking of what is awareness, what feels like awareness to me,
Oh,
and
good.
all the discussion
That's
and all
good. So
the
yeah.
discussion.
So you got rid of an idea.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah.
That's good. So that's in the right direction. Okay.
Yeah.
Question.
Yeah. The next question is from Carlos Castaneda books.
Well, wait a minute. Before we go there, how is this undifferentiated awareness different, say, from the what people call the I am?
So when I so yeah, I think so when I used to do the Nisargadatta Maharaj
Mm-hmm.
exercise of focusing on the I am,
Mm-hmm.
uh, whenever I will like recall the word I, or like recall I am,
Mm-hmm.
that I am was is localized. It's
Good. Good.
that
So what
that
happens to
I
the?
is
Okay, go ahead.
yeah. So that is localized from here to somewhere in the upper half of the body,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah. So that's what I am. Uh, I used to think I am is.
And now, what is I am?
Now I need to investigate
That's
because that
that's
was a
correct. That's correct. You need to keep going. All right, but you're headed in the right direction, so that's good. All right, so let's find out what's yeah. So I don't want to put any thoughts or words in your mouth, or anything like. I don't want to suggest anything. I don't want to I don't want to add anything. Nothing needs to be added. So okay, good. Let's go to the next question.
yeah. So this next question is from the Carlos Castaneda books.
Okay.
I think it's Journey to Ixalan, or maybe the next one, the Tales of Power, the Tales of Power.
Okay.
So in this one, Don Juan is asking Carlos to stop the thoughts, and he's telling him
Stop
stopping
the
thoughts,
thoughts or stop the internal dialogue.
stop the eternal dialogue.
Okay. That's important to keep the
Uh,
words straight. Okay, go ahead.
yeah. So he's saying stopping thoughts at will for sustained periods of time is essential. Uh,
It's
with
very nice. Yeah.
and
When
he
you
says
wake up, you don't
stopping
have to
the
do that. You don't have to do that. Your thoughts stop. But go ahead.
yeah. So I think this is before waking up because he's still training
Sure,
him
sure. No, no. You're right.
like that. Yeah. So he's telling him only when a warrior stops the dialogue, uh, then only uh, like that is he's talking as like that is like a prerequisite before anything else can happen on top of it.
Okay.
So I, but I remember from one of our discussions in the past that
So this is what Carlos has said. Don Juan has said. What's the question?
yeah. So the question is this thing that stopping the dialogue is essential, but we also know that we should not be struggling with stopping the thoughts. They will come up, and as long as I don't engage with them, they will automatically stop. I don't need to force.
Good question. Yeah. I mean, struggling. Okay. Washing blood with blood doesn't work. Going to war with war doesn't work. Fighting fire with fire doesn't work. So if you start struggling with your thoughts, those are just more thoughts, right? So there has to be a more subtle approach. Okay, so what's the question?
So the question is in the book they talk about willingly, intentionally stopping the dialogue, stopping the thought.
Who,
But
when you
then
say they, who's? It's very important to differentiate Carlos from Juan, from Julian.
Mhm,
Okay,
mhm.
give me 1 second. I'm gonna have to plug something in. No, that's all right. I think we can make it. Go ahead.
So I think it's definitely Don Juan telling Carlos to 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 be able to stop the dialogue at will.
Okay, fair enough. Give me 1 moment. I'm gonna have to do something different here. We're going to lose power on this device unless I plug it in. These Apple guys don't make it the easiest thing in the world to find the hole. Okay, here we go. All right. Go ahead. So, go ahead. Can you find the passage?
That I need to. I don't have it right now.
All right. Well, I got the general gist of it. What's the question?
Yeah, the question is how. So then, his instruction to start the dialogue. Is he talking about forcing, or is there like he's also talking about not forcing, but just following the process to get to that stage where thought dialogue has stopped?
Okay, well, there's a lot to unpack there. Number one, he's talking to Carlos, and Carlos is a very specific instance. And number two, what's the most important thing in from Don Juan's point of view with regard to warriorship? It's impeccability, right? And why is impeccability important? Because through impeccability you save energy, a certain kind of energy, because your mind is not preoccupied with things like envy or jealousy or greed or ego or protecting the ego or who said what to whom, and you don't waste a lot of energy on useless, totally futile things that go nowhere anyway. So impeccability is the hallmark and the most essential part of warriorship. And the Buddhists say the same thing, the Taoists say the same thing. I just was at a passage earlier today just to show you the similarity, and the Christians say the same thing. So let me read a passage from the Tao Te Ching that happens to fit with this. Know the male, keep the female. Be humble towards the world. This is the Tao Te Ching, okay, 2,500 years ago. I'm going to sneeze. Know the male, keep the female. Be humble toward the world. Be humble to the world, and eternal power never leaves, returning again to innocence. Knowing the white, keep the black, be an exemplar for the world. Be an exemplar for the world, and eternal power never goes awry, returning again to infinity. Knowing the glorious, keep the ignominious, be open to the world. Be open to the world, and eternal power suffices, returning again to simplicity. So it's incredible to me that we attribute to Christianity and to the New Testament and to the whole notion of the importance of innocence, humility, impeccability, but the same thing is prescribed 2,500 years ago in a completely different culture, which I find extraordinary. So impeccability is the central issue for the warrior, okay? And the reason for that is so you don't squander energy on nothingness, right? Now he's making recommendations to Carlos to stop the internal dialogue. For Carlos, who's a complicated character, right? He's a Angelino that's probably by this point he's a famous man. His books are selling, in the millions around the world. And so that was his prescription for Carlos at that time. But you remember, Carlos is writing these books in retrospect from his notes. And so, yes, that was the advice that he gave him. What's your question about it, you personally?
Personally, it's just that, am I missing something? Is he advising Carlos to be forceful in stopping the internal dialogue?
I don't know. Probably not, but I don't know. Carlos was a thick-skulled guy, right? Mm-hmm. He lived very much on the right side, and he was also obsessive. So I don't know. He could have been trying to short-circuit him by forcing the issue. Say, okay, go to war with yourself and short-circuit it. It's kind of like in Zen, the Zen master will sometimes give oftentimes give the especially in Soto Zen, Soto Zen, I believe, give them a koan and have them go chew on it, right? And they will chew on it for months and months and months, And then if they're fortunate and they have been impeccable and the conditions are right, the right side cracks and opens up. Excuse me. Thank you. Okay, so do you see what I'm saying? So in this kind of work, it has to be by the individual prescription. And so the koan that the master might give the adept or the acolyte or whatever you want to call him, the student, would be tailored to that student. And so, yeah, in general, probably, I'm not sure what Juan was thinking at that time.
Okay.
But I mean, certainly stopping the internal dialogue is great medicine. I mean, one of the great freedoms is to be able to stop thought. And that's part of what turning the light around is about.
I have a kind of similar, like another question on this, on the similar lines.
Okay.
So this one is, it's like I was like watching some like TV show, The Chosen, which is on the life of Jesus, and I heard they say this something like God spoke, and then there was a word, and with the word, heaven and earth came into being. Uh, and I tried to find a passage, and there were like so many different translations available of that.
Good.
So
That's really good that you're following up and you're trying to understand actually what's being said. You're just not reading it in a perfunctory manner, right? And instead you're going and trying to find, okay, what is this word? What was the actual word in Greek or Aramaic or Hebrew or whatever it was? It wasn't Aramaic. Okay, so well, I don't know. New Testament, Old Testament? Old Testament, right?
yeah,
Genesis. Okay, so but before we go there, let me explain to folks. The right side corresponds to the left brain. None of this was discussed in the Toltec. They didn't understand about hemispheric laterality, presumptively. But when we speak of the right side, we're talking about the left hemisphere of the brain, which is where language resides. Okay, so go ahead. So read the passage again, or tell me the passage again.
yeah, it was like God spoke, and then there was the word, and with the word, world, heaven, and earth
So he
came
spoke
into
without a
being.
word.
So he spoke, and then there was the word.
Okay, so
And,
and what? Okay, so tell me what you learned about that.
so yeah, to me, it feels like he's saying that once the meditation started for a human, like the language started,
Well,
or once
let's. This is important. So we're talking about a creation story. So where is this from? Genesis? Do you have a Bible,
I don't have a.
Torah, or something like that? Well, we can't be sloppy here. I mean, we got to have exactly the quote citation, right?
Yeah. Let me see if I can quickly just find what
Well, don't
was
do it
said.
quickly. I mean, this is important, very important. I mean, this is the foundation of an entire Abrahamic tradition: Islam, Judaism, Christianity. This is very important. No need to rush it. Just look into it.
Okay.
And
I
don't
think I
trust
found it.
Wikipedia with your soul, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I think so. It says something like in Christian Standard Bible, Peter 2:3:3:5.
Peter?
Peter, yeah.
Okay, what does it say? Just for
Peter,
fun, we'll try that. Peter? Okay, go ahead.
it says, by the word of God, the heavens came into being
Well, that's
long
very
ago.
different.
And yeah, I think this is totally different than what. Yeah, this is different. So yeah, I need to look up. I am not able to find it.
Okay. And
But
my
but this
power
made me.
supply over here. Go ahead.
Yeah, but this started this meditation in me
Now,
that
there's a big difference between Peter and Genesis. Okay.
yeah yeah. So this started this meditation that maybe if so maybe for like if there was a time when language was not there, did humans at
Also,
that
I'm
time were.
just for. I mean, forgive me, but I'm not sure the Christian Standard Bible, whatever that is where I go for as a source.
Mhm,
All
mhm.
right.
Got it. Yep.
Okay. Now,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Where were we? What were you saying?
Yeah. So I was just thinking that when there was a time when there was no language and but humans existed, were was there no commanding self at that time because there was no language, there
Yeah,
was no
presumptively
word.
not. Yeah. The way the Toltec describe it is they call it silent knowledge. Yeah, before conceptual thought, there aren't the concepts of language.
Hmm.
And so when we look at Genesis and we look at them eating from the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, both evil and good are conceptual concepts, correct?
Hmm.
And so that becomes kind of the beginning of the end for silent knowledge, because now man gets lost in his mind,
Hmm.
right? And instead of living in the real world, he lives in a map that his mind is created. And so no wonder we're lost and alienated and anxious. We're not living in the real world. We're living in a world of our mental construction. And we're
Hmm.
so loony as to believe that we're going to be able to recreate it with a computer, and live in a simulation. That's how far off we are.
Hmm.
So, but that's a separate topic. So, okay, so yeah, what's the question?
Yeah. So in that time when there was no language, were were a lot of people woken up just because of that, because there was no language. A lot of people were enlightened at
It's
that
an
time.
interesting thought experiment, but let me think. It's interesting because I mean you could argue that without the conceptual the thought, the barrier, the veil, the confusion, when you get rid of that, then you just have pure awareness. But an animal, I don't know that's it's not the same thing. It's more than just removing the confusion and the veil and so on and so forth. It's a deeper and more powerful understanding of the nature of infinity, or outside space and time. Maybe they never go into space and time. It's possible they never go into space and time, and so they just live in a different. I don't know the answer to that, frankly. I'd have to think about that quite a bit, because it's not just going for your next meal, right? Or for your next sexual partner, or protecting yourself from a predator. There's more to it than that. It's mysterious. So I really don't know the answer to that. I'd have to really think about that, because it's freedom from all those drives. It's also freedom from yeah, well, time and space, and freedom from and power and understanding. It's an understanding with a capital U.
Hmm.
Let's see, with in the Tao, what did the passage I just read? What did they say? They call it eternal power never leaves, returning again to infinity, returning to innocence. Yeah, so power outside of time and space, eternal power, something like that. I mean, it's not just, you can't really do it in words. Yeah, you can't do it in words.
Mm-hmm.
Even to call it an experience is pushing the envelope.
Mm-hmm.
So the answer is I don't know. I'd be speculating.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, almost all of the, like most of these religious texts or scriptures or spiritual material is kind of riddle. Like we need to think and like contemplate a lot to get to the real meaning. So
Yes,
without
agreed.
that,
And also remember, religion is a fairly recent phenomenon. I mean, in the history of humanity,
Mhm,
I mean, it's pretty recent.
mhm.
Let's
So
give it
that
five
makes me,
thousand years. I mean, with the new archaeological finds that they're, new archaeological notions,
mhm,
it's a relatively recent thing.
mhm,
But I suspect there was some kind of proto religion the whole time that seems to be built into us as humans. It's
so
very
what?
mysterious, the whole thing. I mean, why are we? I mean, this is why, although I disagree, they say that man was made in the image of God. Well, that makes sense, but then we constructed a God made in our image, right? So we anthropomorphize God, which I believe is a big mistake. On the other hand, how else are you going to begin to approach him or talk or her or again, languages imprisons us. But
Mhm,
yeah, definitely worth contemplating for sure. All of them, if
mhm.
you can. Yeah.
So I was thinking that maybe this exercise
You know what
of
was
racking.
hilarious? Okay, I listened to a lecture by Peter Thiel last night just to
Mhm,
understand what's going on out there. And he starts by saying, I'm religious, not spiritual, which I thought was, very Thiel like. I'm not spiritual, I'm religious. But at the end, he says that he says something to the effect that after looking at the major religions, he finds that they each contain an equal amount of truth. Interesting thing for a man like him to say.
mhm,
Oh, I think he's a real Christian according to him.
mhm.
All right, but go ahead. I digress.
Yeah, so I was just thinking that this exercise of racking my brains and going through the riddles to figure out the real meaning, maybe it's essential for development, and that's why everything, all the scriptures, all the spiritual material is written like that. Uh,
Doubtful, but maybe for you it might be. Okay, so there's two questions. There's your question maybe, and then there's an assertion or an assumption that this is why they were written that way. Those are two separate questions. Can you separate them out?
uh, uh, yeah. So the first question would be why are other texts, spiritual material written this way, that it's not direct, like
That's the
it
second
can't be.
question. That's the second question.
Mhm.
And the first one had to do with maybe you need to go into these to find out more.
To find out. Oh yeah.
All right. So answering the first question, maybe you do. Maybe you're that person. Maybe you're a modern man who understands that religion, although however useful it may have been in the past, now because of mass communication, the internet and instant communication and our global situation, that now we have to see, because there was no chance of someone in the, well, there was vanishingly small chance of someone in, say, the 16th century hearing about a religion on the other side of the world or in another culture altogether. I mean, maybe a few people had the information, but there was no printing press, for example, or
Mhm.
at some point there was no printing press, and so only a select few could even be exposed to something outside of their cultural domain.
Mhm.
But now things are different, and you're different. You're a modern man, and so like the Sufis say, and I believe they're correct, that we always have to update and adapt the teachings for the age. And now it's not difficult to get your hands on Taoist or Buddhist or Hindu or Christian. You can get those materials. It's very easy. So yeah, it may be necessary or it may be desirable for you, right? Is it that way for everybody? Not necessarily. Depends on their intelligence. Depends on their makeup, their personality, their character, so on and so forth. Now, with regard to the second question, what's the second question?
Why are the materials written this way?
Well, I don't think you could generalize, right? As they say in the Tao Te Ching, those who know do not generalize, those who generalize do not know. So now the question is, which text are you referring to in particular?
So let's say if I talk about like the Sufi stories or Nasruddin jokes, or even like Bhagavad Gita, those things.
Well, those are two very, very different things. The Sufi stories were specifically chosen, adapted, translated for the contemporary Western man, right? So we know why those were, but that's not considered scripture, right? So we know why those were done. He's very Idris Shah is very explicit about why he's done this. He's trying to help us out here in the West. We're so benighted and ignorant of everything except for what we've been force-fed since childhood. So he's trying to help out. Now the Bhagavad Gita, that's a totally different script. When was that first written down? Do you know?
I tried to look into that, but there was no clear answer when that was.
It's much later than people imagine. Much later. 17th, 18th century. And a lot of the, so religions like to get their authority from being old, right? The more old, the more authoritative and the more mysterious or whatever. But I think it's important to realize that, some of these scriptures were tampered with. Same thing for the Christian scriptures. There were apparently, Shaw and Lessing describe a situation where there were many contemporaneous accounts of Jesus, but the Catholic Church had them destroyed or just tried to wipe them off the face of the earth. And some of these still exist, presumably in Arabic, I would guess, or preserved in Arabic. I don't know the details, but religions are not necessarily the friend of truth. Not necessarily. I'm a friend of religion, but let's be honest here. But religions, the boundaries between religions may have outlived their usefulness, frankly. I mean, we don't need wars over whether Allah is God, right? Or Jesus is God, or you're Buddhist so you don't believe in God, which is kind of ridiculous also. So they may have outlived their usefulness, I don't know, but it'd be nice not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Because for the longest period of time, that's where all of our knowledge was preserved. If it hadn't been for the Muslims, collecting the Greek and where would we be, or the Catholic monks in Ireland and elsewhere preserving the text, all of this stuff would be gone. So like everything else, there's good and there's bad, or if you want to look at it that way, there is what there is. And in the West for some period of time, and also probably in the Middle East, the only people who had any knowledge were the people associated with the church. Everybody else was just completely, they couldn't read. So I think we have a long way to go with regard to the Bhagavad Gita. I don't think we have a good clear-cut history of that, and I think it's being deliberately, I don't know about deliberately, but it's obscure. Same thing with yoga. I talked to Krishnamurti about yoga. Woo-hoo. Look what he has to say about that. But that's not the kind of thing people want to hear, and there's not much yield in it, so let's pass that over. Another question?
Yeah, I have a follow-up on that. So while I was thinking about that, suddenly this these like few pages from David Hawkins' book came
By
to
the
my
way, I'm not
mind.
an authority on the Bhagavad Gita, and it may have been written down earlier than that. I don't know, but it'd be nice to find out. Maybe you can do that. Maybe you could do that. That'd be great. A real contribution. Go ahead, David Hawkins.
Yeah, so
Good
David
old David
Hawkins came to
Hawkins.
mind.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then like he had this this scale. Like he used to number things, like
Yes.
how close to truth they are, and he like ranked some books very
He's
highly. So
so
like
American. He's so American. We have a Likert scale of spiritual achievement. It's so American. It's hilarious. I love David Hawkins, though. I think he's an extraordinary man. Made a great contribution to many people. I'm sorry he's behind a paywall, but so but yeah, so he has a scale of consciousness, but it starts very, very low. It starts with people who lie and steal and cheat and kill each other, and then it goes all the way up to the archangels and above. Right? It's a lot of fun, and it's very attractive to many Americans.
mhm.
So I'm sorry, but I just wanted to introduce people. And he wrote what, about 4 or 5 books, and and in lectures as an old man before he's dying. They're really very inspiring and fun. And there's some limitations, but I won't go into that. But okay, what's the question about David Hawkins?
Yeah, so he basically like kind of numbered these books. Like Bhagavad Gita is like this number, and other books are this number. Like how close to
Yes, and
like
he
how they
ranks
are.
the Zen masters, right? And since he
Yeah,
had not heard of anyone else, I think, who was it, the one that he liked so much?
like he
For
like
some
he
reason, this thing
basically
keeps saying it's the battery's dying. So it says I've got 5%, but I've got it plugged in and it seems to be charging. I don't know what's going on here. Give me one moment. Okay, well, if we get cut out, then we'll get cut out, but it says it's charging.
Mhm.
So if we get cut out, it was nice seeing you. So let's keep going until that happens, if that's going to happen.
Yeah, so so like he gave 1,000 number to like three people, Jesus, Krishna, and Buddha. He
Hmm.
gave the number of 1,000. Uh, so is there any credence to those numbers? Like,
Well, I'd give them all 2,000. So there, So I mean, of course, I mean, that's just the Americans. They like to have everything ranked and what's better, what's best, what's better than the best, so on and so forth.
mhm,
Yeah. So I mean, but that's just the limitation of Hawkins. He has a lot of other really nice contributions, and he helped a lot of people, and still does, even though he died. Uh, when did he die? 20 years ago, something like that. I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. But no, I wouldn't put things on a scale like that.
mhm.
But it was useful for people to start thinking about it. But where it gets hard is he only knew certain Zen masters, and I'm trying to remember the name of the one he really loves. Oh, it's not coming to me. But the problem is he didn't know about Dogen, right? He didn't know about a lot of things, and so bless his heart, he did what he could. But no, I wouldn't put any credence on number 1,004. I mean, where does that number come from? Why not 3,000?
Mhm. I mean, he developed this technique, right? Like the power of force, where we like he will do this test of like pressing the arm, and
Yeah,
depending on
that
that, he
I'm
will.
not going to comment on. I think that's for let the kinesthesiologist have that or whatever. My silence can be interpreted any way you want, but I think people that know me will know how I feel about that. But uh, there was something else. Yeah, well, the distinction between power and force, right there, that's very, very nice. I mean, I mean, he didn't describe it this way, but it's a very Taoist understanding that don't use force, use power. And just like in this book, forgive me, I keep going back to this. It's a beautiful passage. Be an exemplar for the world, and eternal power never goes awry, returning again to infinity. Be humble to the world, and eternal power never leaves, returning again to innocence. So there's not a word about force, but there's a lot about power, and the difference between using power and force. So when nations resort to force, then we're all in trouble because we're now in a war. But if you have the power of, say, moral authority, or you have the power of impeccability, or you have the power of the innocent, I mean, as quaint as that word sounds these days, you prevail ultimately. But we've lost all that. And so the idea, so going back to your first question about do you try to force your thoughts to stop? Was Don Juan suggesting that he needed to force the internal dialogue silent? The answer most likely is no, not at all. He's saying use your internal power of intent, use your impeccability, and let that internal dialogue stop on its own accord, or quiet down on its own accord. Do you see what I'm saying? So I think that's a beautiful contribution. That's an example of Hawkins' way of formulating things, which were really oftentimes very brilliant. I think extremely useful, especially for Christians. And I recommend him to Christians. I'm not sure I can recommend the kinesthesiology, but I'm not a kinesthesiologist tonight. I don't want to discuss that. I mean, there's no yield to it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
But it makes you wonder. The secret protects itself. It's really quite extraordinary. Okay. Next question.
Yeah. My next question is about prayer. So lately I have structured like my prayer thing is in a way. So like I kind of first get into that space of awareness, then I kind of remember about it's a will of God, not my will that I want to force, and I was wondering, is there any yield to prayer? Because if God is there, He already knows what's in my mind. So why I have to verbalize? Is it just remembrance that I'm going for, or is there something more to prayer than that?
Who said you needed to verbalize?
Yeah, I don't know. Just a prayer, the
Because
idea of
again, so
prayer.
these are just assumptions that people make, and I'm not trying to point you out. I'm trying to use the situation as a teaching situation. But sometimes the most powerful prayer can be listening, not talking. With a silent intent, right? With a silent intent, and you've already set your dedication, and you know where you're headed, and so perhaps listening can be a prayer, and I don't know that verbalization. Now, for some people, they may want or need to, and that's fine too, right? Depending on their stage, and not everybody's the same.
Mm-hmm.
If you read the Catholic mystics or the Christian mystics, they're verbal all over the place. And if somebody's a poet, maybe that's how they want to worship, or that's how they want to demonstrate their love, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But for silent knowledge, I'm not sure that you need to verbalize a lot. Maybe you just need to listen. But to listen, you got to get everything out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sir?
Yeah. So then the question comes: what is prayer? Then I don't know what is prayer if it's not remembering or verbalizing.
Well, keep exploring. Prayer is a very personal matter, and it changes and evolves as you do.
Mm-hmm.
And it also depending on the situation, right? I mean, no one said it was a unitary thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
what occurs to me now is that there's an infinite number of kinds of prayers, as many as there are birds. But that's just an association. I mean, I don't know why prayer would be one thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Something else before we stop?
Yeah, I think this is one thing that I was thinking. So, just because I was watching that show and it was showing how Jesus performed so many miracles,
Be careful
like
with Jesus
healing.
on TV, okay? Be real careful with Jesus on TV, because remember, they want an audience. They want people to be entertained. They want people to be, talk to their neighbors about it, and maybe they're selling something in the commercials. I mean, so be real careful with Jesus on TV. But go ahead.
Yeah, so but because I don't have any background in Christianity and I haven't studied Christianity, so I was wondering if
Good. So
those
that's
miracles.
good. That's very good. If more Americans like study the Bhagavad Gita or what, it's just even on TV, that would be good. So I'm not trying to discourage it. I'm just saying be careful with it.
Yeah. So I was just wondering, did did those miracles or things really happen, or is it just like with time people just added stuff?
Which miracle?
Like he did like a lot of healings.
No, I think that
Uh,
happened. Definitely happened. People with power can heal, and they do. Okay.
and like yeah.
All right. Anything else before we stop?
I think I have one last thing
All right.
that I
Let's do
wanted
it.
to. Uh, yeah. So I was thinking about like death, like what happens at death. Uh, and I was thinking that if death is the end of memories, the collection that has been gathered when living, then if I have an enlightened person and then I have a regular person with all the mental stuff going on, after death, when the
Who
clothes
are
are
you?
dropped,
Who are you trusting to tell you what happens after death?
I don't know who I can trust. Who
All
can
right.
tell
Well,
me about?
that's a start.
Yeah.
At your stage, I'd say, have you checked in with the Buddhists?
I mean, I have read Buddhist texts. I have
I mean, I'm
read.
talking
Uh,
specifically about Tibetan Buddhists,
okay.
right?
Mhm.
I mean, I'm just saying that you're relying on someone else to tell you about something that this is kind of important, no? Immortal life or whatever. So be careful. Don't make assumptions like that. This is a whole, it's everybody's got a clean slate to work with, but first they have to clear it off.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that you can't learn from other people. I'm just saying that don't. I mean, you're making all kinds of statements with no. I mean, I don't understand who the authority is.
Mhm.
All right.
No, no. Yeah, they were just a contemplation. Yeah, yeah, no,
Right. Well,
nothing
when you
like a.
contemplate, make sure go to first principles, right, and say, okay, well, why do I believe this?
Mhm.
And it must not be because you heard somebody else say it and now you believe it. Then that includes me, right? Check all this stuff out for yourself. I mean, that would be a terrible thing if you were to adopt something because I had said it. You have to check it out for yourself. That's the whole.
Mhm.
That's the journey, right? Don't
Mhm.
short
Yep.
circuit your own journey.
Mhm.
Okay, sir.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Take good care. I think you're making
Sure.
progress. Good, and just keep at it. And
Sure.
but you may want to go to with regard to childhood. You may want to go earlier than 5 or 4.
I mean,
Okay.
the first memory I have is of four.
Are
So
you sure? Check it out.
okay.
Be sure that that's your earliest memory. Okay, sir.
Okay. Sound
All
good.
right. Keep the faith. Ciao.
Thank you. Bye.